This video is going to be kind of a review of four-part writing and also bringing a little bit more attention to what notes you should be doubling and what kind of chords. And that includes like first inversion triads, second inversion triads, and specific Roman numerals that we should and shouldn't double certain notes, okay? So what I'm going to do first is explain a couple of the doublings up here, and then we're going to actually just go through a figured bass example together. And as we're doing that, we'll talk about these different inversions and what ones we should double and which ones we shouldn't, okay? So this is all about doublings. Doublings, great. So obviously for root positions, which I'm going to write here, root, we're going to just use a C major and four-part writing as examples on this line. Root position, we should be doubling the root. So, or scale degree 1 of that. So that means that for a C major chord, we should be doubling a C, because there's 4 notes for four-part writing, but 3 notes in a triad, right? So inevitably, you're gonna have to double something, right? So root position, you wanna double 1. Or you could do scale degree 1, root, whatever. That one's kind of easy to remember. So if I were to write one out like this is a great example. I put a C in the bass and a C in the soprano, and then I have my E and my G. This is nicely spaced, and this would be a great like starter chord to get us going somewhere. Okay? If we are in first inversion, or 6, we should double the root or the 5th. Not necessarily the 3rd, which is the lowest note in this. So if this was a C major, if this one's C major 6, our lowest note's going to be that E, right? We kind of want to avoid doubling that E, all right? It's just because it's a little bit unstable, especially because it could be major, minor, whatever. We really want to emphasize the root C or the 5th G. So it's kind of up to you. Doubling the 3rd is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just recommended to double 1 or 5 instead. So here I'm just going to put a G here, and then I'm actually going to double a C here and then a C up top. So I actually have octave Cs, and then I have G and E. You could also double your G. I could change this C to a G here, and that's okay as well. That's an octave apart, so that's all right. Great. All right, our other ones are 6-4. We want to double the 5th. That's just like an always thing. We always want to double that root or the lowest note of this one. So if this was a C major 6-4, our lowest note is a G, and we want to double that G. So I'm actually going to put a G down low. I'm going to double that G an octave higher, and then I can just put E and C up top, and that's a nicely spaced chord as well. So this one is probably like the loosest term one. You could do 1 or 5, whatever you want, and even if you come into a situation and you kind of have to double that 3rd, it's okay. But really for root position, we really want to double that lowest note, and then same here, we want to double the lowest note as well. Now something to be careful of is if we are in a 5-6, okay? So Roman numeral wise, so let's say that we're in C major, a 5-6 would be a G major 6, right? What we want to be aware of is to not double the lowest note. So in this case for 5-6s, never double the 3rd, okay? So that would be the B. If I were to do this, and then B, G, let's do a D, and then let's say that I double the 3rd, and I'm showing you the reason why. These B's are leading tones, right? Which we've talked about in the past, that is very, very important to resolve. So if we had to resolve the leading tones, guess what it creates? B has to go to C, and then B has to go to C. That's actually creating parallel octaves. So if you double that B, you're going to always fall into the trap of parallel octaves, B and B going to C and C, right? So that's why we never double the 3rd in a 5-6, because it's really important to resolve that leading tone, and then it just creates parallel octaves, which we want to avoid. So instead, I would always recommend, maybe in this case, I would just double the G up top or something. And then that also kind of goes to a 7. If a 7 is in root position, you're going to want to double that lowest note, right? So again, let's say that we're in C major, so this would be a B diminished, right? Again, you're running into that same issue that if we're at B diminished and we want to double that B, guess what it creates? It's going to create parallel octaves, right? And we don't want that. So in this case, I put a B, and then let's say we have an F and a D. Again, what's going to happen is that we're going to want to resolve those tendency tones, those leading tones, up to C, and then create parallel octaves. So this is like the only exception for a root position chord that we do not want to double the lowest note. Instead, probably favor the fifth. Usually the fifth is a really good one to double instead. So in this case, what I might do is actually, I might just give this one a D right here. Oh, I gave that's an E. I might just give this one a D then, and then that's a little bit better, and we're not going to run into those parallel octave issues. Okay, so this is all doubling. So roots, you want to double the lowest note. First inversions, you want to double 1 or 5 of the chord, not really 3. 6/4s, you want to double the fifth, which is also your lowest note, so 2 Gs in this case. If it's a 5/6, do not double the third, and if it's a 7 in root, do not double the root. Okay, so this is kind of our guide for doublings. What we're going to do now is actually go on to this figured bass example, and we're going to talk through identifying these chords and then also writing 4-part above it following these doubling guidelines, okay? So this is going to be step 1 for figure bass. You look at the key signature. We have 4 sharps, so that is E major or C sharp minor. Those are our options. I then look at our first chord and our last chord, and we are ending and starting on a C sharp, so I'm leaning towards C sharp minor. So I'll write that in. And then what I'm going to do is actually put the chords, the macro analysis above, to figure out what all these chords are, and then we are going to do Roman numerals, okay? I'm just going to give us some space by erasing these guys now that we know what's going on. Great. Wonderful. All right, so if we have a note and there's nothing underneath of it, it's a triad in root position, which means that this is built on C sharp, and then I just imagine an E and a G sharp above it, so this is a C sharp minor in a root position chord. Okay. Next, this is a note given to you with a 6. 6 means that it's a triad in first inversion, so what they're giving you is that E is the third. So here we have a C, and then we have a G, right? So we have a C sharp, E, and G. We actually just saw that chord here. It's just in an inversion. So that is C sharp 6, minor 6. Great. Next, this is built on G sharp. If it's giving you a 7, it is a root position 7th chord, right? And then if it's a floating sharp, that implies that the third above the note given is raised, okay? So I just kind of threw that 3 in there for you to visualize that. So that means we have a G sharp, and then we're gonna have a B sharp, then we're gonna have a D sharp and an F sharp. That's kind of a weird chord, so let's take that off to the side. That is a G sharp, B sharp, D sharp, F sharp chord. Okay, so what are we gonna do with that? Usually what I do is that I just relate it to a note that I am very comfortable with. I'm really comfortable with G. So then what I do is that I take each one and I lower it the same amount. So I subtracted 1 sharp here. I'm going to subtract 1 sharp there. I'm going to subtract 1 sharp there. And then 1 here. And then this chord is much easier for me to figure out that quality. We have a major triad and a minor 7th. So that is, therefore, this is a G sharp, major, minor 7th chord in root position. And then I'll just kind of erase that and leave that be. All right, next is an A, and there's nothing underneath of it, so it's a root position triad that follows the key. So we have an A, we're gonna have a C sharp, and we're gonna have an E. That means that it is an A major chord in root position. Next, same thing, there's nothing underneath, so it is a triad in root position. So we have a D sharp, we have an F sharp, and we have an A sharp. This is another one of those funny chords. D sharp, F sharp, A sharp. I'm going to do what I did before. I'm just going to subtract a sharp from each one in order to identify the quality, right? So D is so much easier for me to wrap my head around than D sharp. And looking at this means that it is a D sharp minor chord, right? Because that's a D minor, and then you just add your sharps back in and add that label. So that is D sharp minor in root. Next, 6/5, that means that this is a 7th chord in first inversion. So what they're giving you is the third, What they give you below it is there and there and there. Perfect, right? So that's the third, so that's our root, third, fifth, and seventh. I'm gonna carry all those sharps over that are given in the key. So this is G sharp, B sharp, D sharp, F sharp. We actually saw this chord earlier here, except this one's just in an inversion, right? So it was a G sharp, B sharp, D sharp, F sharp chord over here. We identified that, but this time it's just in 6/5. So I'm just gonna write G sharp, major, minor, 6/5. Next, this one we saw earlier. Always, you know, look at your references, make it easier on yourself. We've seen this before. We labeled it as a C sharp minor in root, so we'll just carry that over. Next, with a 6, this is a triad in first inversion, right? So they give you the third. So that means that there's one note below it and one note above it, which is going to be D sharp, F sharp, A sharp. This is another one of those funny chords, but we did identify it here. This is just in an inversion, right? So now the third is in that root, or is it in the bass? That's what I meant, sorry. So D sharp minor 6 is this chord. All right. Next is a 6/4. So this is a triad in second inversion. So what they're giving you is the fifth. So you should just imagine a third and a root underneath of it in order to spell out this chord, which is a C sharp, E, G sharp. This is a chord that we are very familiar with in this passage. This is C sharp minor 6/4. Next, this is a G sharp, and the floating sharp just means that there is a raised third above it. So there's no inversion here, it's just raising that third above it. So this is a B sharp and then a D sharp, right, because of the key. And we actually pretty much saw this chord earlier on these guys, except it just doesn't have a seventh this time, right? Because this was a G sharp, B sharp, D sharp. This was a G sharp, B sharp, D sharp. This again, G sharp, B sharp, D sharp. So this is a major triad. So that is G sharp major in root. And then last but not least, it's just a given C sharp. So we know that that is C sharp minor, right? Okay, now we're gonna go through and fill in all of our voices, and we're gonna follow all of these doubling rules that I talked about earlier, okay? So for C sharp minor, that's gonna be a 1 chord. And let's fill in those voices. Actually, what I wrote here in C major can work really well for this as a beginning chord. Right? So I doubled, this is a root position triad, and I doubled the root, C sharp, E, and G sharp, right? Great. Next we're going on to C sharp minor 6, which is going to be a 1/6, right? And here we do not want to double this E. So actually what I'm going to do is that I'm going to carry over a lot of the common tones, but I'm going to not double this E. If I were to carry over everything, yeah, it works, but I don't want to really carry that E over because then I'll have 2. So let's at least carry over the G, and then carry over the C. And then our options are to either bring this up a third to a G or down a third to a C. Personally, I'm going to go up a third to a G. Okay. Next, G sharp major minor 7 in C sharp minor is our 5/7. Okay. And for common tones, this chord has a C sharp, E, G sharp. This chord has G sharp, B sharp, D sharp, F sharp. Okay. Common tones, it looks like we only have G's that are shared, and G is already taken care of, so we can't carry that over, unfortunately. So let's keep going. So if the bass note goes down, we want to try and get everything to go up. So let's have this G sharp go up to, could go up to that B sharp is probably the best. And again, spacing errors are totally okay between bass and tenor. So we have a G, B, and then we need a D and an F. So I'm actually going to have these guys split. I'm going to give this a D sharp up here and an F down there. And there's your G sharp major minor 7. Make sure that you always raise that leading tone when it's indicated for you. Make sure you get your accidentals in there. All right, next is A major in root, which we're going to need an A, a C sharp, and an E. Also, what is this Roman numeral, right? Sorry. So just counting up from C, C, D, E, F, G, A, it's going to be a 6, major 6. There are no common tones here. So if the bass note goes up, we're going to try and go down. But also we need to take care of that leading tone. So that leading tone is that B sharp. We're going to bring that up to C sharp. Oh, I guess I don't need to define that exactly. So we resolved our leading tone, that's good. And then let's try and get everything else to go down. And it's a root position triad, so we want to try and double that A. Okay, so we're going to go down to E. And actually in this case, what I'm going to do, yes, in root position, we want to try and double your root as much as possible. But as you can see, if I needed to double an A, I'm going to be jumping down a fourth or up a fifth, which is a really far jump. You could instead double a C, but that's also kind of frowned upon to double thirds. Or you could double E as well, and that's doubling the fifth, and I'm actually going to do that as an option because I think stepwise is a little bit better than skipping so much. All right, D sharp minor. If we're in C sharp, that means that this is a 2 chord. We're going to want to try and double that D. So first, let's see if there's any common tones. A, C sharp, and E to D, F, and A. So A is actually our common tone, but unfortunately it's only in the bass and it's already resolved. So everything else we should try and just bring down. Let's bring this to a D. And then we need an F and an A. Actually, maybe not. Let's do an A down here instead. Let's do a D up there. And then we have D, D, A, we just need an F. Perfect, that's a better voicing. So as you can just see what I just did, it's a little bit of puzzling to try and make sure that we have the best voicing possible. All right, G sharp, major, minor, 6-5. Let's see if there's any common tones. This is gonna be a G sharp, B, D, and F sharp. Ooh, D is a common tone, so we'll carry that over. F sharp's a common tone. And then all that we need left is a G. That was really easy to fill out, right? Okay. Next is a C sharp minor. We want to try and double that C sharp because it's a root position triad. So is there any common tones? G, B, D, F to C, E, G. Ooh, G is a common tone. Let's carry that over. And then let's actually bring this down to a C and then this one down to an E. We have C, C, E, G. Also, our leading tone was already taken care of for us because it's in the root, in the bass note, and it was already resolved the correct way, right? Also, I just filled in those last two Roman numerals. I'm sorry I missed that. D sharp minor 6, we already discovered was a 2, but it's in first inversion. So we're gonna try and not double that F. We're gonna instead try and double a D or an A, right? Unfortunately, there are no common tones, so let's bring this one up to an A. Let's bring that down to a D, and then this one up to a D. So we have D, D, F, A. Perfect. Next is a C sharp minor 6-4, so that's a 1-6-4. We're going to try and double that G. Whenever it's a second inversion triad, we want to double that fifth. So it's actually a really easy answer. I'm just going to double stem that. And then I'm going to bring that down to C, and then this one up to E. All right, next is G sharp major. We're going to want to try and double that G sharp. We can probably just keep it the same, G sharp, G sharp, G sharp, G sharp. And then we just need a B and a D. So let's do B here, B sharp, D. Great, and then last but not least is our last 1 chord in root position. Let's carry that G over. We also want to resolve that leading tone, C, C, G, and then an E. Great. So this was an example of going over everything that we should be doubling, things to be conscious of, and then a figured bass example showing how we apply all of these doublings and how we can navigate or maybe bend some rules like in this chord right here to make our voice leading as smooth as possible.